Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about great developers. I know I've told stories on this channel about bad events and bad people, and I've tried to explain that it's because those are the learning moments in a lot of my stories. But it's gotten to the point where some people went, it sounds like you were surrounded by incompetence, and I've tried to explain how that isn't true. So I thought today, for a fun Friday, I would do the opposite. I would talk about the great developers that I've worked with. And by the way, it's very easy to remember them. I didn't even have to look in my notes. A lot of the bad stories I've told you, I had to look them up in my notes. I either didn't remember them or didn't remember them very clearly. I had to be reminded of them. But this didn't have to do this at all. And I'm deliberately going to go and talk about people in all kinds of parts of game development. I'm not just going to talk about programmers and designers, which I know a lot about. So let's start with a great executive I worked with. He was a VP. He was really nice. He was very direct with me. He could be very persuasive. I once joked with someone that he could tell me to go to hell and I would pack my bags and look forward to the trip. But he never did. And also, he never lied to me. To this day, I've never looked back and gone, oh, he lied to me about that. Even better, he didn't do this thing that a lot of people who've been in charge of me have tried doing, where they're talking about A and then immediately mention B. And be like, as if A caused B, and they want me to make that connection, but that is not the connection. He never did that. The only thing he ever tried to persuade me of is things that he really felt strongly about. And it's, by the way, it's nice working with an executive who's passionate. You sometimes see that disappear as you go up the chain, and some of it's understandable. They have other things to worry about, like market share and commercial franchise appeal and expansion of intellectual property rights. But he never did. He never lied to me. He was always great to work with, and he was just super enjoyable. In programmers, I do have one story to tell. I've worked with a great programmer. He was brilliant. He's probably the smartest person I've ever met. But his code was a joy to behold. And I'm saying this as a programmer. And I don't think I'm an awful programmer. I think I'm a good programmer. I don't think I'm a great programmer, but I'm pretty good and I'm pretty generalist. I mean, I've done all the different parts of a game engine that you need to write and all the parts of a game. I've done UI, I've done animation, I've done assembly level timing support. I've made, OS abstraction libraries. I've done everything you ever need to do to make a game. So I know what I'm good at and know what I'm bad. This guy was amazing. His code was clever, but it was never overly complex, meaning it was simple wherever it could be. If it was a simple thing he was trying to do, it was simple. Where it had to be complex, it was complex, but it was also beautiful. It was just impressively coded, often in a way that didn't need any comments because it was just so elegant. You could tell what he was doing. Sometimes I'd look at it for pleasure. I would open Perforce, grab whatever he had checked in the day before, and just look at it. Because I can imagine that this is how an author, a writer, might read great works of literature and understand it or even view it at a better level than non-writers could, just in all of the command of the author of the English language. This guy's command of C++ was just masterful. And I would just look at it. And sometimes I would look at his code and I'm just like, I would never, ever in a million years write that code. Anyway, I've also worked with great designers. And so I tried to think of, because design is so vague, I tried to think of a system narrative level designers that I've worked with. So I worked with a great system designer once. He did very interesting and very thoughtful system mechanics. But his true strength was a complete and utter mastery of Excel. Yes, the spreadsheet. He could balance the most complex arrays of formula, from combat formulas so that it made sense what different skills did and how weapons and armor work together, to item economy. He could figure out what loot should be dropped by what type of monsters. He could create tiers of things and then go on to tell level designers, here's how you should do loot for this type of creature of this tier. Here are the items. It was gorgeous. And if you asked him a question, he could back it up. It was never, I thought that would be a good idea. It was, well, if you look here, this item is worth this much because it does this much damage relative to these items to do this much damage. Lots of use of statistics, lots of use of stochastic modeling, because sometimes things had ranges or had randomness, and he would take that into account in his Excel spreadsheets. They were gorgeous. I worked with a narrative designer who was not just a good story author, which I know a lot of narrative designers come into the game industry and they're like, well, I didn't write a book and I didn't write a TV show, so I'm going to write this game story and that player will follow it. I don't want that. I want a great story author who also understands player agency. I love that they can make interesting characters, not just sarcastic ones. I'm going to bring that up again because, that's my bugaboo. They can write amazing dialogue, and I'm saying that as someone who tried to write good dialogue and couldn't. This person's narrative skill was such that you wanted to keep playing. If you ever had that reaction when you're playing a game, you're like, I'm just going to play for like another few minutes. I just want to see how this ends. And next thing you know, it's like 2 hours later because you just kept playing until the arc finished because it was just so wonderfully written. That's what this guy could do. For a level designer, I worked with a level designer once who was just, and I didn't realize at the time, it took me until later to realize that he was just an amazing level designer because he could put together maps faster and more cleanly than anyone else. In other words, the map was good looking, but also when you played in it, the flow was right. There was good combat space and stuff. And he did this from very disjointed art pieces. And I would love to go back in time and apologize to him for providing him a tool that like all the wall segments weren't always in the same place and all the props that were, you couldn't say, show me all the trees, show me all the rocks. And he often did it with very vague design specs on what the level had to support. What was just amazing, he had this intuitive sense for space, combat space, visual space, as well as what areas could be compacted so the player wasn't running everywhere all the time. Just a great level designer. As for artists, I worked with a great concept artist once, just absolutely phenomenal. And everything you wanted in concept art, it was pretty, it was evocative. When you looked at it, you were like, I would like to be in this world that is being shown to me. And fun. There has to be a playful element. There has to be some reason I want to, excuse me. There has to be some reason I want to play a game that looks like this. And he could do all this, and it was very distinctively his. It was his art. I could just look at it and go, yeah, I know who drew this. Similarly, I worked with a lead artist whose art was incredibly thematic for the whole game being made. As opposed to, sometimes you work with an artist who has their own style, and that style is in every game they make. They can't alter it to be thematic for the game they're making. This lead artist could. And as a lead, he meant he could get the other artists to do the same thing. So the entire game's art gelled. The sprites looked like they belong with the props and the walls and the UI and the box and the manual. The whole thing just worked. Let's talk about audio for a second. I worked with a really good musician once. He would listen to and understand my very primitive non-musician descriptions. And then I would give him selected examples, and he understood I didn't want him to copy those examples. Those were examples of the kind of music I liked based on the descriptions I told him. But from all of that, he would weave this tapestry of music, which I still listen to today. I still code to some of his music. It is that good. Similarly, I've worked with several great QA people. They were usually the leads. They played the game in a very smart way. They'd push on it. They would stress it. They would try to break it. And they would try to break it in lots of different ways, not just the way they thought was fun or the way they should be playing it. And they knew that this is what I wanted. And they were unafraid to report these failings. And that's important because I've worked with people. I worked with a producer once who yelled at a QA lead for finding a bug. And it was something like, I can't believe you found this. We're trying to ship. I can't believe you didn't find this weeks ago. Guess what? When it turned out the bug was fixed, turns out the bug had only been introduced a few days before. So, nice one, producer guy. Anyway, great QA people are rare, and when you find them, they're awesome. What's my point of all this? I tried to cover all the different parts of development. I hope if you ever make a video game that you get lucky and you meet people like these to make your games with, because it was an honor to work with all of them, and I hope they know that. And at times it was really humbling to work with them because I saw work being done that I knew I could never do. I saw code I could never write, dialogue that I would never have been able to write. I watched people throw themselves at a QA at a bug in QA and test it in a way that I'm like, I'm not sure I would ever have the patience or diligence to find. Now, if only all these people were at the same company at the same time. Anyway, those are some great developers I knew.